This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market shares eased a little today, weighed down by a slide in Chinese stocks. Traders are saying that investors are pulling out of high-flying consumer firms on worries over lofty valuations. Now, we saw MSCI's index of developing world stocks ease in 0.2% today. South Africa's JSE was weaker on mixed Asian markets. Tencent, of which Naspers is the largest single shareholder, was down about 1% on the day at some point. Locally, rolling blackouts have intensified, which of course has dealt a further blow to South Africa's already recessionary economy. Now, also coming up on the show today. Swiss firm ABB faces tax dodging accusations in Zimbabwe. Nigeria's House of Reps a speaker in Ghana to resolve a dispute between traders in the two nations. And fancy wigs make for good business in Africa's most populous nation. Well, we begin today's show with efforts to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus. The World Health Organization says that it hopes to secure about 230 million doses of any COVID-19 vaccine specifically for Africa. Only 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines are being tested in Africa. The Global Vaccine Allocation Plan, also known as COVAX, aims to help buy and fairly distribute 2 billion doses of approved vaccines by the end of 2021. Now, officials from the WHO say the initial batch will cover around 20% of the African population, giving a priority to those who are on the front line, such as healthcare workers, and then expanding to cover vulnerable communities. Now, during an online news conference, the director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Nkengasong, said that talks with COVAX will supplement other negotiations with nations such as China, Canada, and the United States. That's over securing access to potential COVID-19 jabs. Now, still on the same issue, U.S. drug maker Pfizer says it will be able to disclose whether a COVID-19 vaccine it is developing is successful by the end of October. The vaccine is expected to be submitted for approval immediately upon success. The firm has enrolled more than 23,000 patients in vaccine tests.
We randomized individuals in one-to-one, which means that 15,000 will receive the vaccine, 15,000 will receive a placebo. And then we are waiting to see if this population of 30,000 people will start getting disease. And the expectation, if the vaccine works, is that the people that are getting disease are coming from the group that didn't receive the vaccine. And those that receive the vaccine will have much less than those that they didn't in terms of disease. We expect to, by the end of October, normally, should be able to have enough events to say if the product works or not.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the issue of tax evasion and avoidance on the African continent. One of Switzerland's most profitable firms, ABB, is now facing accusations of evading taxes worth about $13.4 million in Zimbabwe. Now, this comes amid the crippling economic crisis in the country that has seen inflation soar to over 300%. Details of the firm's alleged tax dodge were provided to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists by a former ABB employee in Zimbabwe. The documents include court records, contracts, and bank statements, as well as confidential advice to ABB from tax experts. Well, let's get the latest on that story. We're joined by Farai Mwakutuya in Harare. Farai, always good to have you on the show. Now, of course, looking at that court case, ABB is insisting that it outsourced its operations in Zimbabwe. Is this a clear-cut case of a multinational operating in Zimbabwe avoiding or evading taxes which they should be paying to the state?
Well, Uche, I think the area of tax law is quite complicated and it's very difficult to say if something is clear-cut, but I certainly imagine that the revenue authorities here believe that that is the situation, that their case has merits, which is why they are pursuing it in the manner in which they are. Not only are they, claiming the funds that they feel should have been paid as tax in the country, but they've also imposed a penalty showing that there is indeed, some illegal activity, or certainly what was done was not in the manner in which it was done. So given that they are pursuing it and have levied a penalty, you'd imagine that they believe that it is a very strong case, but as I said, a very complex area of the law, and we'll wait to see which way it goes.
Now, of course, the Revenue Authority has fined the company about $4.7 million US dollars. ABB is now appealing the tax office audit. What happens next, Farai? Is the state aggressively ensuring that ABB will pay up?
Well, earlier I had an opportunity to speak to an official from the Revenue Authority who said that, because this matter is before the courts, they cannot comment. But I would imagine that the fact that they've gone this far and traced this case, which dates back several years, would show that they certainly are intent on getting this money. And also, I think, pursuing it to show intent to other would-be evaders or avoiders in this case, to make sure that, they are serious about revenue collection and that they want to get every single penny that is due to them. As I said, in the midst of a financial crisis here, challenges in Zimbabwe, and so any amount of revenue that we can get, or that the revenue or the government can get, they will certainly go after, and I would imagine that they would want to pursue this as far as possible.
Now, of course, Farai, this is a touchy issue for the continent and Zimbabwe specifically. In fact, the UN Economic Commission for Africa estimates that African nations are cheated out of about 100 billion US dollars annually in tax revenues due to, of course, tax evasion and avoidance from multinationals such as ABB. So is this a sign that Zimbabwe's government is now ensuring that multinationals in the country pay their fair share?
Indeed, I think it is a sign that they are going after this quite aggressively. I think not just that, but I think in recent months we have seen the Revenue Authority stepping up its efforts to tighten any loopholes in terms of tax laws to make sure that there are no leakages in terms of revenue. They've started to even tax transactions in US dollars, trying to go after some of the transactions that they assume or presume are being done in cash, all in a bid to try and maximize and make sure that they're not losing out on any potential revenue. As I said, this case dates back several years now, and the fact that they are going back that far shows that they are not they're leaving no stone unturned, and they are determined to make sure that they get what is due to the country. So I certainly see this as a statement of intent by the Revenue Authority, and in line with statements and the trajectory we've seen from them in terms of trying to maximize revenue collection and tighten loopholes and make sure they are more efficient in collecting revenue.
And of course, it will be interesting to know what the scale of the problem is in Zimbabwe. How much money does the country lose to tax evasion and avoidance, especially to multinationals currently?
Well, Uche, I think it will be very difficult to put an exact figure to that. It will be a lot of speculation. I think given the fact that, this evasion is done through misrepresentation, concealment of information and records, false invoicing, mispricing. It will be very difficult to know the actual amount. Suffice to say that the Revenue Authority itself has said, we've heard officials as recently as March saying that there could be millions and millions of dollars that have been lost through this sort of practice. And in particular, unfortunately, a sector that is prone to this sort of practice is the mining sector. We know a senior Revenue Authority official spoke at a meeting of mining sector officials saying that there were practices of concealment of information, of mispricing, of under invoicing, of transferring and shifting profits, and also a practice particularly rife where a multinational uses debt to finance a subsidiary here and then repatriates what are ostensibly interest repayments but are actually dividends. And those are some of the ways in which they do that. It is obviously a very, as I said, complex area, very sophisticated form of misrepresentation. And so to give an exact figure would be difficult, but I can tell you, like the rest of Africa, millions and millions of dollars have been lost out, and the hope is that now there will be a better way to try and a more effective way to try and clamp down on it and get that lost revenue.
Well, as always, great to have your insights on the show, Farai. That's Farai Mwakutuya joining us there in Harare, Zimbabwe. And moving on now, cash-strapped South Sudan is now seeking a $250 million loan in order to help rescue it from financial ruin. Now, the government says it is in talks with the African Export-Import Bank in a bid to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on its economy and support food security. The move comes 2 weeks after the central bank admitted it had no more foreign reserves left. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet reporting.
South Sudan's government says the loan will be used to make up the shortfall in the country's revenues created by the pandemic. Juba says it has already prioritized where the money will go.
They're spending on limited expenses. So far, what is taking place now, we are spending merely, if there is money, we pay salaries. There's money, we pay for security items. If there's money, we pay for COVID-19 related expenses.
South Sudan's government gets almost all of its revenue from the sale of crude oil. However, oil output has plummeted to 175,000 barrels a day from 185,000 barrels per day due to the effects of COVID-19. Global oil price has also fallen. The Central Bank of South Sudan says it is looking for other alternative sources of revenue.
We want to diversify so that we don't depend on oil. Because when the oil price is like early this year, they went up to zero. So we couldn't even sell our oil. So where do we pay the people? Where the Minister of Finance get the money?
South Sudan has been finding it difficult to access loans from international financial institutions because they have lost faith in the government's transparency. Juba says it is working to improve things.
The whole idea is that we are now working towards a more transparent system, which the community, the public, will be following from time to time.
The African Export-Import Bank is a pan-African multilateral trade finance institution created in 1993 under the auspices of the African Development Bank. Its purpose is the financing, promoting and expanding of intra-African and extra-African trade. South Sudan's central bank says it is also buying gold from within the country to build its reserves and be able to have a long-lasting solution for the economy. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now. The country's Speaker of the House of Representatives is in Ghana for talks about the ongoing dispute between traders in the two nations. Now, Femi Gbajabiamila is on a two-day visit to meet with the Ghanaian government with a delegation of lawmakers from the country, or from Nigeria. Now, the aim is to find possible solutions to the traders' disputes, and CGTN's Phil Ihaza is there, and he reports from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
Femi Gbajabiamila says he hopes that after meeting with his counterpart, the Speaker of Ghana's Parliament, Honorable Mike Okwaye, they will arrive at a mutually acceptable resolution to tackle the ongoing crisis. There's been tensions between both countries since the Nigerian government closed its land borders in August last year to neighboring countries, including Ghana, in a bid to halt rice smuggling to the country. The government here says this was targeted at promoting locally produced rice in Nigeria, and experts here believe tensions may continue as long as Nigeria's borders remain shut to member countries within the economic community of West African state ECOWAS.
This is born out of struggle for space, for market, for customers, where the host countries believe, rightly or wrongly, that the foreigners who are actually supposed to be African brothers are there to usurp or take away what rightfully belongs to them. The Ghanaians might think that Nigeria has shortchanged them by shutting our borders with other ECOWAS countries.
The speakers been meeting with Nigerian traders in Ghana who believe they've been badly treated in the country despite being formally registered as foreign traders and paying all required taxes. The Ghanaian government says only shops belonging to foreign traders that don't have up-to-date or valid permits are affected. But here in Nigeria, there are strong feelings.
I don't expect such thing from Ghana, but you know, because of the nature of things in Nigeria, we have already called ourselves before the entire world. So a lot of countries who are not supposed to even talk to us are taking advantage of our situation to just treat us anyhow.
Seeing the way Nigerians are being treated there is really, really unfair, and I think the government should take the necessary step to curb these kind of actions so that it doesn't spill over and we have a kind of retaliation from Nigerians over here.
The Nigerian government says it will no longer tolerate further acts of hostilities on its citizens and has demanded a stop to the alleged maltreatments. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And now more of our corporate headlines today. A high court in Ghana has dismissed the case by MTN, seeking the court to quash the decision to classify it as a significant market player in the sector. Now, the decision aimed at exposing the telecom provider to greater competition was made by the National Communications Authority in the country. And South Africa's ComAir Limited requires an estimated $72 million in funding and will also have to cut a fifth of its workforce to restart its operations. The airline, which has been under bankruptcy protection since May, could get back to business by December if the rescue plan is approved. In South Africa's Impala Platinum's annual earnings have soared by 400%. This follows a rise in metal prices and a weaker rand, offset by the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the mining sector has been hit hard by the pandemic, which led to mine closures and miners contracting the novelty virus. And General Motors and Honda Motors have revealed plans to team up in North America in order to make a range of vehicles. The partnership aims to deepen their ties as the auto industry comes under greater pressure to share technology and costs in order to meet demands for cleaner vehicles. Now, under the alliance, the companies intend to share common vehicle platforms, including electrified and internal combustion propulsion systems. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a quick break now, still to come on the show. The Japanese government considers further assistance to help Mauritius deal with an oil spill. And Ethiopia plans to generate $400 million in export revenue from its industrial parks in the next fiscal year.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, Japan's government is considering a further assistance to help Mauritius deal with an oil spill. The environment ministers from both nations have now agreed to mitigate Japan's efforts. The MV Wakashio, which is a Japanese-owned boat carrying about 4,000 tons of oil, struck a coral reef on Mauritius' southeast coast in July and began spilling oil in August. Now, the spill spread over a vast area of endangered corals, affecting fish and other marine life in what seems scientists have called the country's worst ecological disaster. This now prompted the government to announce a state of environmental emergency.
Mauritius is highly dependent on its coastal and maritime environment. The sustainability of the major economic activities and protective functions are totally dependent on the vitality, aesthetics, and ecological functioning of the coastal and maritime ecosystem.
And let's move on now. Global credit rating agency Moody's has kept Egypt's credit rating at a B2 with a stable outlook. This has been supported by the country's diversified economy and adequate forex reserves. Moody's says that Egypt had adopted policies that kept inflation in check and maintained low interest rates for quicker economic recovery. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more details.
The economic reform program adopted by the North African nation in the last 4 years has reaped its rewards amid the crisis. Egypt is one of the few countries in the region that has managed to sustain itself during the economic fallout caused by COVID-19. Key among its success during the crisis has been the policies embraced by the central bank during the last few months, which have led to a major drop in inflation.
The proactive steps taken by the central bank at the outbreak of corona kept interest rates down, and this led to low inflation levels and prices. This helped the government provide all basic needs, food and products to the population without any delay and at affordable prices. Also, releasing huge funds to stimulate the economy has given support to several sectors in both the services and industrial sectors to continue operating, thus preventing higher unemployment rates.
One of the positive effects is the realization of a sustainable Egyptian currency. There is now enough foreign exchange reserves to cover 3 years and safe levels of external debt because of the low interest rates. But the focal point, according to Moody's, is the resilience of the Egyptian economy.
It's known that Egypt's economy is diverse. For example, we have several sources of hard currency: tourism, Suez Canal, remittances and exports. Some have seen huge losses, but others made up for it, limiting the damage. Another aspect is the drop in international oil prices. This lifted the burden off the budget. With less expenses, foreign reserves stayed intact.
The International Credit Agency has not only praised the current situation, Moody's has forecast a strong performance on the medium term. It predicts an impressive economic growth of 5.5% next year, up from the current 3%. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And heading to Ethiopia now, the country is planning to generate $400 million in export revenue from its industrial parks in the next fiscal year. Now, the plan also aims to create employment opportunities for thousands of its citizens in sectors such as textile and apparels, as well as footwear and other leather products. From Addis Ababa, here is CGTN's Gerum Chala with more details.
Ethiopia's Industrial Parks Development Plan of generating more revenue is gathering steam, with the state aiming to collect more than double of the revenue earned in the previous year. And so, if all goes to plan, up to $400 million is expected to be collected from exports of industrial outputs next year. Last year, Ethiopia's industrial parks brought home $165 million revenue from export sales of different outputs, including textile and garments. Ethiopia's industrial parks house mostly light industry operators who mainly are foreign investors. But now the new plan seeks to invite at least 36 local developers to invest in industrial parks located across the country. That is a move hoped to motivate local investors and create more opportunities for indigenous industry. Similarly, while increasing the much-needed income, Ethiopia's Industrial Parks Development Corporation is aiming to create 45,000 new jobs for citizens within the next year. According to government authorities, providing as many jobs as possible to locals is one of the initial goals of industrial parks development here in Ethiopia. And that plan seems to be working well, as there are thousands of people who earn their livelihoods from the state-of-the-art industrial locations in the country. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's government is looking at developing its infrastructure through funds raised from Islamic bonds, also known as Sukuk bonds. Now, the World Bank says Nigeria requires a $100 billion annual investment in order to fix its infrastructure over the next 30 years. Well, this year, over $400 million from the Sukuk funds have been raised and released to the Ministry of Works and Housing for road projects. Our correspondent Phili Haza with the story.
Nigeria's road network needs improving, and the government is set to tackle this problem with alternative funds of about $420 million raised from an Islamic long-term financial bond called Sukuk.
We know that it is a matter of trust to have entrusted this administration with their hard-earned resources by investing in that instrument. I assure you that we value that trust. From the evidence of what has happened to Sukuk 1 and Sukuk 2, your trust is not misplaced, and it will not be misplaced in the 44 road projects that will benefit from this Sukuk.
Sukuk bonds don't offer an interest rate, but instead an annual rental payment to investors of 11%. The government then also returns the initial investment once the duration of the bond elapses. Nigeria's economy has been hit hard by both the pandemic and dwindling crude oil sales on the global market. And as a result of low revenue generated by the economy, Sukuk bonds have in recent times become a more viable option for the government to fund its budget. This will be the third time the government is selling these Sukuk bonds to private investors, with the first being $270 million in 2017 and another $270 million in 2018.
What it means is that we're going to have increase in mobility of labor and goods, which will facilitate trade and will also help. Nigeria is in about minus 6.1% GDP growth, which is of course negative, and we need to spend more now. And this spending should be directly on infrastructure. It's also getting positive impact in connecting farms to the market, because rural community road that will be constructed, you now have people who can now transport their goods without getting spoilers we've experienced over the time.
However, experts say corruption will need to be prevented in the process of spending these funds in order for the government to effectively utilize the interest-free bonds.
If you are paying back all of this money and we don't have a very good system for checkmating corruption, so when ministries and parastates are issuing out contracts for these roads to be constructed, and you have kickbacks setting like 30-70, you will not get excellence. You will not have proper monitoring. And I am encouraging government to set up Sukuk disbursement committee. And there should be people that have actually invested, so it's part of their money, invested in the fund and work with those in ministry so that they don't breach any protocol.
Our goal is simple.
President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated his commitment to tackling corruption and ensuring Nigeria's infrastructure is improved before the end of his tenure in 2023. And good roads like this is what millions of citizens across Nigeria can gain access to when such promises are fulfilled. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now. Still coming up on the show. China defends its updated export rules as not targeted at the TikTok sale in the US. And India bans 118 apps with links to China over what it says are national security concerns.
No war, no
began holding machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And half past the hour, let's recap today's top headlines. The United Nations peacekeeping mission has condemned an attack on students who were sitting their final exams in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, a militia group attacked the school and raped some girls, forcing 700 students and teachers to flee the school. And health workers in Uganda are sounding the alarm over an increase in mental health cases, which they say are linked to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the country's national referral hospital, Butabika, has recorded about 1,500 cases over the past 4 months. That's up from just 500 before the national lockdown. And South Sudan's government is now urging international partners to support the implementation of a peace deal for Sudan. Juba says the agreement in Sudan will help consolidate peace in the Horn of Africa. And finally, the discovery of a mysterious tunnel in Kenya's Rift Valley region has caused excitement amongst locals and historians. The tunnel is reported to have been built back in the 1940s during the Second World War. Its chambers may have acted as shelters or stores for British soldiers. And that's a recap of our top headlines. Well, let's get some international news. China says its updated list of tech export rules does not target any specific company, but experts are saying the changes will mean the sale of TikTok's U.S. operations will now require Beijing's approval. This comes as TikTok continues to be caught up in the center of a diplomatic storm between China and the U.S. Last Friday, Beijing published a revised list of technologies that are banned or restricted for export. This comes as ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, signaled that it was close to reaching a sale by either Microsoft or Oracle. Well, the U.S. has warned that it will ban the video sharing platform by the middle of this month over security concerns. Now, the China International Fair for Trade in Services is expected to open on Friday. This marks the first major trade event to be held in China since the coronavirus outbreak. Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to give a keynote speech at the opening ceremony. The Chinese Commerce Ministry says the event is a demonstration of the country's determination to open up its economy. The ministry also adds that it's also an important platform for deepening a global trade cooperation. Now, the event will last for 6 days and will involve participants from nearly 150 nations and regions. Meanwhile, China has restored direct international flights to Beijing after a 6-month hiatus that was triggered by the coronavirus pandemic. An Air China flight from Myanmar that landed at Beijing's capital airport was one of the first direct flights to arrive since March. There also will be direct flights from a host of other nations with relatively low COVID-19 rates, including Thailand, Pakistan, Greece, Denmark, Sweden, and Canada. Now, a special terminal has been set up at the Beijing airport to receive those flights. Passengers will be tested for COVID-19 on arrival before being transferred to designated sites for 14 days of quarantine. Meanwhile, India has banned about 118 apps with links to China over what it says are national security concerns. Amongst them is Tencent's popular video game, PUBG, which has over 50 million users in India. This move comes as tensions escalate between the two nations over their disputed border in the Himalayas. Here's CGTN's Ishan Garg with more.
PUBG is a massively popular game in India with most of its user base under the age of 21. Almost 13 million players log into PUBG to play the game every single day. There is a massive gaming ecosystem built on PUBG's popularity. There are thousands of people who use PUBG to earn a daily living. They compete in professional esports, and sometimes the prize money of these professional games can range up as high as millions of dollars. So the banning of PUBG will come as a shock to these people. But on top of that, experts say that it is going to come as a shock for Tencent, which sees India as a massive high growth market with 400 million actually active monthly internet users. Now, Tencent's another app, WeChat, was recently banned in India, and Tencent had plans of expansion in the country, but experts say those plans are going to be derailed for now. The company has already invested billions of dollars here and was hoping to launch newer products in the next coming few months. What's unclear though is that what's going to happen to Tencent's employees in India. For those hundreds of people, the next couple of months are going to be very rocky, but experts say that we need to keep in mind that the ban might not be permanent in nature, so there is a possibility that in the next coming few months the Indian government could actually lift up the ban not only on PUBG but on the other apps that it has banned since June. Ishan Garg, CGTN, New Delhi.
Well, let's turn our attention to Brazil. Its economy shrank by a record 9.7% in the second quarter. This has dragged the country's economy back to the size it was back in 2009. Now, the magnitude of the slump in activity across its economy in the second quarter was huge. According to the government statistics agency, IBGE, industry fell by 12.3%. Services was down by 9.7%, while household consumption was down by 12.5% and government spending by 8.8%. Only agriculture expanded in the quarter by 0.4%. Now, IBGE attributes the slump to anti-coronavirus lockdown measures that slammed activity in almost every sector. However, the economy ministry was more upbeat, noting that many of Brazil's emerging market peers posted larger GDP contractions in the second quarter, and that the outlook for this year has been brightening in recent weeks.
The negative result of GDP in the second quarter of 2020 characterizes that Brazil entered a technical recession because in the first quarter we had already experienced a decrease.
That was the initial impact, apparently a 10% fall. 9.7% was what the IBGE showed today, but in truth that's far from real. It's just an estimation of the impact of the pandemic, and it is where Brazil would be if we had not introduced all the measures we did together with Congress. What really happened is that with these measures, we managed to have a U-turn. The economy is returning to its original state.
And now look at France's economy. It is planning on spending $118 billion to pull its economy out of a deep coronavirus-induced slump. While the stimulus equates to 4% of GDP, the package earmarks about $41 billion to make the economy more competitive, $35 billion for more environmentally friendly energy policies, and $29 billion for supporting jobs. Now, this means that the European nation is plowing more public cash into its economy than any other big European nation as a percentage of GDP. France's recession is marked by a 13.8% second quarter GDP contraction that coincided with the country's COVID-19 lockdown. It is also set to generate an 11% drop in 2020 as a whole and is one of Europe's deepest.
This recovery plan aims to keep our economy from collapsing and unemployment exploding. A national wealth loss of 100 billion euros means the explosion of unemployment figures. Unemployment is about companies, but it affects the French. So what we want to do is to massively re-inject the money into the economy so that the economy and companies of course set off again, and if companies set off again, there will be less unemployment and more jobs. It's as simple as that.
Meanwhile, here's what young people who are looking for their first jobs in France have been facing: a dried up labor market. Here's Ross Cullen reporting.
Mehdi Ben Mira is 20 and lives just outside Paris. He used to be a temporary worker and lost one job due to the pandemic, but found a new role in June, only for that company to reduce its staff, meaning he was left without work once again.
I was mad. I didn't know what to do, what to think. In July, I knew I had to find another job, and fast, but when you get so many no's after sending tons of applications, you lose hope and confidence. Time goes fast and you think you don't have time left, especially to pay your rent at the end of the month.
France is going through its deepest recession since World War II, brought on by the effects of the pandemic and the national lockdown earlier in the year. The impact of confinement was unprecedented here in France. The French President Emmanuel Macron says another lockdown would cause considerable collateral damage, but the government hasn't ruled it out as the number of new infections continues to rise. The government has a $120 billion national rescue package ready to be launched as it tries to avoid mass redundancies and mass bankruptcies.
The concern to ensure the maintenance of employment in companies that are still confronted today with a lasting reduction in activity leads me to announce that the partial unemployment scheme will continue until at least November the 1st, and beyond that for 2 years for all companies covered by an agreement on long-term partial activity.
And it is not only current employees who've been affected. The workforce of the future, young people finishing education and looking for their first jobs, are facing a dried-up labour market.
Young people's education pathways have either been severely delayed or have really stopped. So what this means is that they'll be, graduating later, finishing their training later than what normally would happen. And scarring, meaning that this delay in their education is going to have long-term effects, so really lifetime effects on their opportunities for work and on their wages. So when we think about this lockdown generation, that's really what we mean.
The COVID-19 pandemic has created a health crisis, but the side effects of the contagion are spreading across wider society, affecting those who have not caught the virus but are still feeling the impact of the disease. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
Well, let's move on now. Many developing nations in South and Southeast Asia, whose own economies have already been rocked by the COVID-19 pandemic, are now facing another serious blow: plunging remittances. Now, the Asian Development Bank predicts that remittances could drop more than $100 billion this year, with about half that drop in developing Asia. Here's CGTN's Rian Melzer reporting from Kuala Lumpur.
Nepalis are the only foreigners permitted to be security guards in Malaysia. Remittances from Nepalis working overseas make up around 1/4 of that country's economy. That income could plunge by around 25% this year, when it's needed more than ever. Bharat Khadka's brother recently lost his job in India and returned to Nepal.
COVID-19 has caused big problems. I'm the only one working, supporting my brother and his 3 kids, my parents, my wife and child. My income from here is vital.
A study by the Asian Development Bank found that in South and Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan and the Philippines are the countries that will be hardest hit by this fall in remittances. The biggest drop is due to Asian migrants losing their jobs in the Gulf countries and the US. In Malaysia, too, foreign migrants have been the first to be let go as the economy has slowed.
There are great concern among those migrant origin country, and especially among the household that depends on remittances as a stable source of income, paying for food, electricity, to education, to medical cares. So that would be a great concern.
Nepali security guards are much in demand in Malaysia. But as in other sectors, including plantations and manufacturing, the government is pushing for companies to hire locals instead. Still, just as the workers' home countries will struggle to reduce their reliance on remittances, the ADB says host countries too will not easily shed their reliance on foreign labor once the pandemic subsides and their economies bounce back. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
And to the world of gaming, a company called JD Gaming has captured China's League of Legends Pro League Summer Finals in Shanghai. It was a close match. Means the two top teams will compete for China at the World's 2020 Games that begins in September in Pudong. However, will there be a live audience and will the games make money if there isn't? CGTN's Zhang Shixuan reports.
It took top Esports 5 rounds of tough competition to hold onto the trophy. But a close finish meant that JD will still have its first chance at the Games World Championship next month. Good news for fans of both teams. But it's possible this year's final may be the quietest one ever, with no audience at the venue, a health precaution against the virus. It could turn out to be like the game that was played last night.
The biggest difference was that there was no audience. It was like a training match.
And as the focus of attention of millions of League of Legends fans and players, the finals, the Worlds 2020, will begin September 25th and conclude October 31st, with all matches at the Pudong Football Stadium. To make this happen under strict health measures, the organizers have gone out of their way to prepare visas for participants from all over the world and to ensure everyone involved follows strict health precautions.
It's always very difficult to communicate with foreign players about all the process that you need to follow here in China because it's different countries, different system. Well, but in the past few months, we were setting up a connection and conversation with each of the foreign regions, like no matter it's LES, LEC, LCS, to talk with them, share with them transparently what you need to do in China in order to be able to be a part of Worlds 2020, one by one.
Lin says that there is still no decision about whether there will be a real audience present at the stadium to watch the matches, however. That might be a disappointment, but experts say it probably won't affect a major part of the game's revenues.
Although the ticket revenue is an important part, it's not the largest. Sponsorship from traditional companies is one of the largest income sources for esports tournaments. But sales of the online broadcast rights is another important part, and the Bilibili has already bought those rights for 800 million yuan.
Since they're electronic games, it's not surprising that electronic viewership is so important. The League of Legends Spring Split saw a year-on-year increase of 27% in daily online viewership. For the final, the figure was up by 42%. And surprisingly, the China competition has gained increasing popularity overseas, with the viewership jumping 140% outside the Chinese mainland. The foreign audiences watched for twice as long as they did last year.
We have been growing from a subcategory on the game, now become, I would say, a faster growing independent industry, which include a very long value chain, a lot of partners in the entire value chain.
This year marks the 9th anniversary of the game League of Legends. It had 800 million registered players worldwide last year, and there are estimates that the game's commercial value is now up to 50 billion yuan, whether the fans are watching it in person or not. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And shifting focus now, here's a quick look at how commodity markets performed. Oil is down to new lows today as petrol demand weakens. Now, prices fell to their lowest since early August as the continued sluggish economic recovery from the pandemic is also denting sentiment. Meanwhile, gold prices recouping some of the previous session's losses today as the dollar steadied. But of course, gains were capped by an uptick in risk appetite on recent better than expected economic data. Meanwhile, soft commodities such as coffee and cocoa have broadly rallied over the past few weeks, steadying after a period of sharp volatility at the height of the coronavirus crisis. We saw cocoa futures rising steadily, up 10% so far this quarter. Coffee futures for December delivery are up almost 15% so far this quarter. They, of course, spiked in late March as countries began hoarding amid nationwide lockdowns. Now we're heading for a short break, still to come on the show. We look at why fancy wigs are making for good business in Nigeria.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, fashion for African women is fast evolving, and this includes the growing demand for human hair and wigs. In Nigeria, demand for fancy wigs is enormous and is fueling a global trade for the product. Back in 2018, the country shipped in more than 3,600 tons of hair. That includes human, animal, and synthetic hair, as well as finished hair pieces. While CGTN's Deji Banis reports on the business that is now booming in Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos.
They come in different lengths, texture, grades, and colors. Adedoyin Adewale's store in Lagos boasts some of the best quality of hair extensions and wigs in the Nigerian market, and most of them come directly from various donors across different races. The raw ones, popularly referred to as naked or human hair, enjoy the most patronage, largely due to their durability.
We have the virgin hairs, we have Brazilian hair, we have Peruvian hair, we have double drawn, we have super double drawns, and we also have donor, and the donor is really trending now because it's the kind of hair that even after you've used it for like 4 or 5 years, still look exactly the way it is. Most especially the straight one of it. When you use them, it looks so much like you've not used them at all. It's something that you can actually resell. We can give you like 15 years warranty on luxury donor hair.
Wig maker Christiana deals only in human hair. She says it has become the latest go-to for fashionable women who want to switch up their looks. But they usually come at a very huge price.
We have straight, wavy, coily, right? So those coily hairs, it's very hard to find people's natural hair. Those very raw hair that are cut from people that are raw coily hairs, they are really expensive because it's hard to maintain. So they are the most expensive. Then we have the wavy hair, and then we have the straight hair. Now, the longer the hair, the costlier it is.
Years back, most ladies fixed their hair, but wigs are now the trend, and it's been a win-win situation for both hair vendors and customers.
Fixing of hair is tiring these days. It has got to the stage that there are some hair that complement your outfit. So that is why a lot of ladies, they want to have a lot of different wigs. They believe when you are wearing a long dress, you should wear a short wig on it. We do a lot of colors because people come up with different shades of gold, brown. So we just buy, it's just like buying bundles is like getting your materials, then coming up with exactly what your customer wants.
For Christiana, she has made a profession out of the wig making business. She's even written a book on the subject where she highlights some of the growth potentials in the fast-rising sector.
We don't have an industry in Nigeria that does ventilation, like closures, frontals. As we speak right now, in this season now, we are in the season when we are short of closures and frontals, because I heard North Korea or one other country is shut down for a while. We can actually produce this in Nigeria. All we need is the lace and the raw hair, like the type that is not wefted. You know, we can have our own industry in Nigeria, and we can buy from ourselves. You know, we can be so much more. So we can start from being able to produce closures and frontals.
The safety of this raw hair is guaranteed by sellers. The hairs are often washed in conditioners or odor-friendly chemicals to take off any germs before they are shipped for sale. And in some cases, some customers still insist on a second treatment of the hair before they wear them. DJ Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
We now bring you the story of Tunisian violinist Yasmin Azayez. She's a woman of many talents, and she fell in love with the violin at an early age. The violin prodigy recently launched the African Jasmine Music Project, but the COVID-19 crisis and anti-epidemic measures that followed interrupted many cultural activities worldwide. And as CGTN's Adnan Shaushina reports, Yasmin remains hopeful that she and other artists from the continent will return to the stage soon.
This cultural initiative aims to bring together musicians, singers and artists from different African nations.
And I was so inspired by all the rhythms, all the really cool bass lines, all the influences from all over Africa, and it was just so inspiring. So I decided to see how I can make my own vision of African music, which was by trying to incorporate different influences from many countries in Africa. For example, I fused a lot of Guinea music with music from Mali. I ended up fusing music from Senegal with music from like Sudan.
Yasmin Azayez is trying to modernize traditional African music by using modern and old instruments.
I really enjoyed making it. It just felt like such a liberating feeling to play something that was kind of different and new, and especially the fact that it's with the violin, which I think is quite rare with this kind of music, unless they're using their traditional string instruments. So that was really fun, and trying to modernize it in a way that people could dance to it.
The artist likes to mix Tunisian and other African music as a statement against racism in the continent.
The message of a lot of my lyrics are about freedom, are about racism, are about Africa as a unit, not every country being completely separate. So I wanted to really bring together all of our nationalities, all of our influences and all of the backgrounds, and make like a really interesting fusion of all of those sounds.
Stop this prejudice. I've been to East and West, seen the North and South, but Africa was best.
In the African Jasmine Music Project, Yasmin sings in English, French and Arabic, while other singers perform in different local and regional languages. The Tunisian violin prodigy says that music can break all cultural barriers in Africa and the world. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, before we go, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. Nigeria's naira strengthened today, firming up almost 10% to 435 naira against the dollar on the black market and to around 380.5 on the official market. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand firmed up, joining other emerging market currencies in an advance against a weaker dollar. That, of course, also helped protect it from a weak local economy, which, of course, has kept recent rand bets cautious. Well, that is it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.